Okay, I want you to do something for me, just for a second. And obviously don't do this if you're driving.
Uh-oh. You're giving out homework already.
Something like that. Just,
Yeah.
I want you to picture something. Imagine you're the curator of a museum, the most exclusive, high-security museum in the entire world.
Okay. I'm with you. Got the little white gloves and everything.
Perfect. And you have just acquired a diamond. But this isn't, the Hope Diamond or some other famous gem. This is something else entirely.
So we're talking a stone of basically incalculable value.
Infinite value. That's the word. This thing literally pulsates with its own internal light. It's the source of all light, let's say.
Right. The kind of object that nations would literally go to war over. No question.
Exactly. Now, you're the curator. It's your job. Your one job is to keep this thing safe and to display it properly. Where do you put it?
Well, the logical answer is you put it in a vault. You put it behind 3 feet of reinforced steel. You add laser grids, pressure sensors.
A battalion of armed guards.
A battalion of armed guards, absolutely. You build a fortress around it. You protect something infinitely valuable with something incredibly strong. That's just common sense.
It is common sense. What you don't do is take that diamond, that object of pure infinite worth, and just toss it inside a cracked disposable clay pot you picked up at a dollar store.
No. You definitely don't put it in a Tupperware container that's been through the microwave one too many times. That would be malpractice.
And yet, as we look at the stack of source material we have in front of us today, that is precisely the image we're being asked to get our heads around.
It is. It's this profound, almost jarring paradox.
It is. And welcome, everyone, back to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a massive theological paradox. We have this collection of texts here, and they span everything from the ancient Hebrew Torah all the way to first-century Greek letters.
And they all seem to circle around this one really baffling design choice from a divine perspective.
Baffling is the right word, because these sources claim that what they call the glory of God, which they describe as the most volatile, heavy, powerful force in the universe, is specifically and very deliberately designed to be housed in what they call earthen vessels.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition, and you have to admit, it's completely counterintuitive. I mean, usually when you read religious history or philosophy, glory is something distant.
Right, it's scary.
It's scary, it's other, it's something you might see when you die. Or maybe it's this event that happens on top of a mountain while you're told to hide in a cave so you don't get, vaporized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the sources we're diving into today, we're talking Exodus, Kings, Corinthians, Revelation, they all argue that this same glory is designed to live inside human fragility.
Which, if you follow that logic, sounds like a massive design flaw. It sounds dangerous.
It sounds like putting a nuclear reactor inside a cardboard box.
Yeah.
I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
That is a very, very apt analogy. It really is.
So that's the mission for this deep dive.
Right.
We want to figure out why. We're going to start by looking at what this glory actually is, because according to all our research, it's not just a shiny halo or some warm, fuzzy feeling.
Not even close.
Then we're going to break down this whole earthen vessel theory, which, believe it or not, argues that your weakness is actually a requirement, not a liability.
And finally, we'll get into the mechanics of it. We'll talk about something the sources called the veil, the thing that apparently blocks the signal.
It's a whole journey. It's a journey from the external to the internal.
And I think to really grasp the magnitude of what these texts are saying, we have to start with the definition of power. That is, to be perfectly honest, a little terrifying.
All right, let's jump right in then. Segment 1, the evolution of glory. I think we have to start with the Old Testament sources because the vibe you get from them is just intense.
Intense is, putting it mildly. In the modern world, the word glory has been so watered down. We think of fame, right? An athlete wins a gold medal and we talk about their moment of glory. Or a beautiful sunset. Oh, look at the glorious sunset.
Exactly. But the primary Hebrew word used in these ancient texts is kavod.
Kavod. Okay, and what does that translate to, literally?
It means weight or heaviness, gravitas. It implies something of such incredible density and substance that it physically demands to be taken seriously.
So it's not just light, it's mass. It's a reality that is literally heavier than everything else around it.
That's the perfect way to put it. It has its own gravity.
I'm looking here at the accounts in Exodus chapter 40 and 1 Kings chapter 8, and they're remarkably similar. They both describe the moment that kavod, the glory of the Lord, shows up to inhabit a man-made structure.
In Exodus, it's the tabernacle in the desert, and in Kings, it's the permanent temple that Solomon built.
And in both cases, it appears as a cloud.
But again, we have to be really careful with our modern mental images here. This isn't some gentle morning mist rolling over the hills of Scotland.
Yeah.
The texts describe a cloud of such density, such presence, that it physically displaces humanity. Yeah, the text is so explicit about this. It says the priests could not stand to minister.
Just stop and think about that scene for a minute. These are men who have dedicated their entire lives to this. They are the religious elite. They are literally in the middle of their sacred duties, probably the single most important moment of their careers, dedicating this new space.
The culmination of everything.
Everything. And when this glory, this kavod arrives, they are physically incapacitated. They have to stop working. They literally cannot remain on their feet. The presence is so heavy, so overwhelming, that all human agency just shuts down.
It's like a sudden change in atmospheric pressure that just drops everyone to their knees. It makes me think of that passage in Isaiah 6.
The throne room vision.
Yes, you have this vision of the throne room, and these angelic beings, the seraphim, are crying out, "Holy, holy, holy." And the text says that the posts of the door moved at the voice. The architecture itself is shaking. The building can barely contain the sound.
And Psalm 29 takes that imagery even further. It says, "The voice of the Lord, which is directly linked to this glory, is powerful enough to strip entire forests bare." It says it makes the deer give birth prematurely.
Wow.
We are talking about a sonic boom of holiness, an earth-shattering power that alters biology and the environment.
So let's just establish this as our baseline for everyone listening. In these Old Testament sources, glory is external. Yeah. It is heavy, it's terrifyingly powerful, it's something that visits a building, and when it shows up, you basically run for cover or fall on your face.
Correct. It is utterly distinct from humanity. It's other with a capital O.
Right.
You know, if you touch the Ark of the Covenant, which contained this presence, you die. That's the safety protocol.
There's no middle ground.
None. But then we get to the New Testament, and we see the first massive paradigm-shifting change in this entire trajectory.
And it all seems to hinge on John chapter 1, verse 14, "And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us."
And the second half of that verse is the absolute key to this whole discussion. "And we beheld his glory."
Ah. So the container changed. It went from a temple made of stone and cedar to a biological body.
Jesus. This is the pivot point for the entire concept. Suddenly, that shaking, smoke-filling, heavy kavod moves out of a building made of cedar and gold and into a human nervous system. Jesus becomes the new tabernacle, the carrier of the glory.
And Hebrews 1.3 says something similar, right? It calls him the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person.
Exactly. He's not just reflecting it. He is it. He is the glory in human form.
Okay, so that makes a certain kind of sense. The voltage, this incredible power, is now contained within a person. But I think most people listening might immediately think, okay, sure, but that's Jesus. He's God. He's the exception to the rule. He can handle the voltage.
It's the Superman argument. Of course, Superman can hold the Infinity Stone, right?
Right. It makes sense for him,
Uh-huh.
but that doesn't apply to me.
And if the story stopped right there, it would just be a history lesson. It would be fascinating, but ultimately distant, something to be admired from afar. But here's where the sources take a turn, that is. Well, it's breathtaking.
This was the real aha moment for me when I was going through the source material. The texts claim that the location of the glory shifts again.
It doesn't stop with Jesus. It moves to the believer, to the listener. You look at a passage like 1 Corinthians 3.16 or a bit later in 6.16, the Apostle Paul asks this incredible rhetorical question. He says, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God?"
He's not speaking metaphorically there, is he? He's calling the listener the actual temple.
He is using the specific loaded imagery of the Old Testament. He's effectively saying, hey, you, remember that building back in 1 Kings? Remember that cloud that was so heavy, so powerful that the professional clergy couldn't even stand up in its presence?
That reality now resides inside your chest.
Yes, that is the radical claim. That's the part that should make us all just stop and sit with it for a moment.
It is wild, and you see it pop up in other places. Colossians 1.27, Christ in you, the hope of glory, or 2 Corinthians 4.6, which says God has shined in our hearts.
So when you synthesize all these different sources, the conclusion is it's radical. The text is arguing that the very same shaking, forest-stripping, smoke-filling power that defined the Old Testament experience of God's presence has now taken up residence inside ordinary human beings.
Which brings us then to the obvious, unavoidable problem.
Which is?
If I have a nuclear reactor inside of me, why do I feel so normal?
Mhm.
Or, let's be honest, why do I sometimes feel so weak? Why do I still have anxiety? Why do I get tired? Why do I snap at my kids in traffic? If I'm the temple of God, why does the roof leak?
And that question, that tension you just described, is the perfect segue to our second segment, the earthen vessel. Because the source material anticipates that exact question perfectly.
This all comes from that key verse, 2 Corinthians 4:7. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels.
And to really get what's being said, we need to look at the original Greek word used there for earthen. It's ostrakinos.
Ostrakinos. It sounds a little bit like the word ostracize.
It actually shares a root. An ostrakon was a shard of pottery. And in the ancient world, we have to understand, this wasn't fine china. This wasn't the beautiful vase you put on the mantelpiece to impress your neighbors when they come over for dinner.
So this is the cheap stuff.
This was the cheap, common, everyday clay pottery. The stuff you used for taking out the garbage or storing leftovers. It was fragile, it was common, and most importantly, it was disposable. If it broke, you didn't glue it back together. You swept up the pieces and you went and bought a new one for a penny.
So to go back to my opening analogy, this isn't just any pot. This is the dollar store pot.
Precisely. It's the Tupperware that's permanently stained with spaghetti sauce. That's the image.
So why? That becomes the billion-dollar question. If I'm God and I have this glory, this ultimate infinite treasure, why would I put it in a super soldier or a golden statue? Why choose a container that you know is guaranteed to crack?
And the text gives the answer in the very same verse. It's so direct. It says it's done this way that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because on the surface, that could sound a bit like God just wants to hog all the credit. I'm going to make you weak just so I look strong by comparison.
It's deeper than that, I think. Think about the mirror analogy that comes up in the previous chapter in 2 Corinthians 3:18. The text describes us as beholding the glory of the Lord as in a glass or a mirror and being changed into that same image.
A mirror's only job is to reflect.
Right. A mirror doesn't generate light. It only reflects the light that's shined upon it. And the quality of the mirror is its clarity, not its fancy frame.
So if the mirror is too fancy,
If the vessel is too impressive, you spend all your time admiring the frame. Imagine a powerful light bulb placed inside a magnificent, intricate stained glass lamp. When you look at it, what do you see?
you see the art on the glass, look at the beautiful colors, look at the detail and the craftsmanship.
Exactly. Your attention is on the container. But now, imagine you take that same blindingly powerful light bulb and you put it inside a simple, clear, maybe even slightly cracked, plain glass jar.
You don't even see the jar. You can't. You only see the light. The jar becomes almost invisible.
The jar becomes a witness to the light, not the main attraction, and that's the logic. If the vessel, the person, were too fancy, if they were perfect, invincible, never sick, never sad, always right, then we would end up worshiping the person.
We'd say, wow, look how great that person is.
But because the vessel is ostrakinos, fragile, clay, common, prone to cracking, when something truly supernatural happens through that person, the only logical conclusion you can come to is, that couldn't have been them. That had to be God.
So our weakness becomes the very thing that points away from us and towards the source of the power.
It becomes the black velvet on which the diamond is displayed.
That's the counterintuitive principle that gets mentioned in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, isn't it? God chooses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise.
Precisely. He chooses the weak things to shame the strong. And the source material is just filled with these incredible case studies to prove this pattern. It's not just a nice theory. The biblical narrative seems to go out of its way to highlight the inadequacy of the people involved.
Yeah, let's run through a few of those. The outline points to Moses in Exodus 33. Now, in our modern imagination, we think of Moses as this heavyweight. He's the Charlton Heston figure, bold and commanding.
He is, but the text shows this other side, this moment of incredible vulnerability. When he asks to see God's glory, what happens?
God has to hide him. He puts him in the cleft of a rock and covers him with his hand.
Even Moses, the great lawgiver, the man who spoke with God as a man speaks to his friend, couldn't take the direct, unshielded exposure. He was a vessel, not the source. And when he comes down from the mountain and his face is literally glowing,
Right.
it wasn't because he had achieved some higher state of consciousness through meditation. It was because he had been exposed to the source. He was, in essence, radioactive with a glory that wasn't his own.
And then you get the classic story of David and Goliath. I love how the source material contrasts the equipment in that story. Goliath is the iron vessel, so to speak. He's got the sword, the spear, the shield.
He has all the best technology. He's the pinnacle of human strength and military might. And David famously rejects the heavy armor offered to him. It doesn't fit.
It's not his.
It's not his. He goes out as a simple shepherd boy, and his declaration in 1 Samuel 17 is the key. He says, I don't come to you with a sword and shield. I come to you in the name of the Lord. The glory broke through the simple vessel to defeat the strong vessel.
The visual is just so crucial there. All of the technological and physical superiority of Goliath meant absolutely nothing against the anointing on David.
And this pattern just repeats itself. Think of Gideon in the book of Judges.
Oh yeah, Gideon was hiding in a winepress, trying to thresh wheat without the enemy seeing him.
Yeah.
He calls himself the least of his family, which is the least of his tribe.
He's a timid man, riddled with insecurity, and yet he's the one chosen to be the deliverer. Why? Because if Gideon had been a great, confident warlord, everyone would have said, great job, Gideon, you're a brilliant military strategist.
Because he was timid and afraid.
They had to say, that was God. It's the only explanation. And do you remember the detail about the pots in Gideon's actual battle plan?
Oh, right, the battle tactic. That's fascinating.
They took torches, source of light, and they hid them inside clay pitchers, inside earthen vessels. And how did they release the light at the key moment of the battle?
They smashed the pitchers.
They smashed them. The breaking of the vessel is what allowed the light to suddenly shine out and create chaos and confusion in the enemy camp. It's such a perfect, tangible metaphor for this entire principle.
That is incredibly vivid. But I have to say, the one that really stood out to me from the notes was the story of the widow's oil from 2 Kings chapter 4.
Yes. That story is a profound and beautiful picture of this whole theology.
So just to set the scene, you have a widow, she's in desperate trouble, her husband died, she has massive debts, and the creditors are coming to take her 2 sons as slaves. She needs a miracle.
She has nothing left but a single small jar of oil.
And the prophet Elisha tells her to do something very strange. He says, go borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels.
And that is the key word in the entire story, empty.
He says, do not gather just a few. And then the miracle happens. The oil from her one small jar, which represents the Spirit or the glory, it just keeps flowing. It fills up every single pot she borrowed.
It flowed only as long as there was an empty vessel available to be filled.
And the text says, and the oil stayed. It stops flowing. When did it stop?
For the very moment she ran out of empty vessels.
So the prerequisite for the miracle wasn't the quality of the pot. He didn't say, go borrow clean pots or go borrow gold pots. The only requirement was the emptiness of the pot.
Exactly. Weakness, limitation, emptiness, humility. In these texts, these things are not described as defects to be overcome. We spend so much of our lives trying to fix our clay pots, don't we?
We want to gold plate them. We want to reinforce them, make them sturdier, hide the cracks.
But the source material consistently argues that our weakness is actually the stage on which the power is most effectively displayed.
The notes phrase it this way, and I love this. Our earthen vessels are the means through which heaven touches earth.
It is a complete and total reversal of how the world thinks. The world says, build yourself up so that you can be great. This collection of texts says, admit that you are fragile so that God can be great in you.
But I want to be careful here because we keep using this word glory, and I don't want the listener to just think of some kind of passive glow-in-the-dark sticker on their soul. We need to talk about the mechanics of this, which brings us to segment 3, the mechanics of power and the veil.
This is a really crucial distinction to make. The source material is very, very clear on this point. Glory is inextricably linked to power. Dynamic, creative, world-altering power.
Yeah, the list of evidence for this in the sources is long. You've got Exodus 15.6, thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. Psalm 29, the voice of the Lord is powerful and full of majesty. Romans 1.16, the gospel itself is the power of God unto salvation.
You cannot separate the two concepts. The notes rightly assert that you can't have the glow without the voltage. When we're talking about God's glory dwelling inside a believer, we aren't just talking about a poetic sentiment or a nice feeling. We are talking about the dynamic ability of God to alter reality.
Okay, so if we have this voltage inside us, this same power that, as the epistles say, raised Christ from the dead, why do we so often feel, well, powerless?
Yeah.
What's blocking the flow? If the reactor's in the building, why aren't the lights on?
And this is where the source material introduces the antagonist of the story, what it calls the flesh, or as we're calling it for this discussion, the veil.
This is that internal conflict described so vividly in places like Galatians 5 and Romans 8. For the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. There's a war going on inside.
I think it really helps to define what the sources mean by the flesh, because it's not
Right.
just talking about your skin and bones or your physical body.
Right. It's more of a principle of operation.
Exactly. The source defines it as the part of our human nature that operates on self-preservation, self-reliance, control, and independence from God.
It's the ego. It's the part of me that insists on being the hero of my own story, the part that wants the credit.
Precisely. The flesh wants to hide the treasure, or worse, it wants to take credit for the treasure. It's the impulse that says, look at me and what I did, instead of look at him and what he's doing. And because of that orientation, it functions as a veil. It's opaque. It obscures the light.
The notes mention that the carnal mind, which is another term for this, is enmity against God. That's a strong word.
Mhm.
It's not just neutral, it's actively hostile.
Because it cannot submit to God's law. It's fundamentally incapable of it. It refuses to be just a vessel. It wants to be the source. And as long as that veil of self-reliance and self-promotion is up, the glory that's inside is contained. It's like throwing a heavy woolen blanket over a military-grade spotlight. The light is still on, the power is still there, but the room stays dark.
So, what's the solution then? How do we get this veil out of the way? Is it just a matter of trying harder to be humble? Okay, today I'm going to really, really try not to be selfish.
No, and that's the beautiful trap, isn't it? Trying harder is just more activity from the flesh. It's self-effort, trying to solve the problem of self-effort.
It's a hamster wheel.
It is. The source material instead points to something it calls the finished work of Christ.
Okay, unpack that term for us.
The central claim of the New Testament is that on the cross, Christ permanently opened the way into God's presence. The barrier of sin and separation was legally removed,
Yeah.
so access to the power is no longer the issue. The issue is our mindset, our default operating system.
So the door's open, but we're still standing in the hallway trying to pick the lock.
That's a great way to put it. And the solution described in the text isn't try harder, but rather to renew the mind and to yield. It's an act of surrender.
It's not about generating the power. It's about getting out of the way so the power can flow.
It's about becoming transparent. The source describes this process as dismantling mental strongholds. A mental stronghold is basically a lie we've come to believe that keeps us operating out of the flesh.
Like what? What's an example?
A stronghold could be the belief that I have to earn God's love, or my value is based on my performance, or I have to protect my own reputation at all costs. These are thoughts that keep the self, the flesh, on the throne.
And when we consciously choose to believe what the text says instead, that we're loved, that we're just a clay pot, that it's not about us, that's what renewing the mind is.
Exactly. When we yield to the Spirit, when we agree with God about who He is and who we are, just the clay pot, the veil begins to thin.
And when the veil's gone, the earthen vessel becomes transparent.
And that is the state in which the life and the promises of God can flow freely. It's not about trying to generate the power, it's about unclogging the pipe so the power that's already there can get out.
This feels like it has implications that go way beyond just, I want to have a better day or I want to be a nicer person. This is starting to sound cosmic.
It absolutely is. And that leads us perfectly into our fourth and final segment, the bigger picture, the cosmic implications of all this.
Because the source material doesn't just leave this at the individual level. It ties this whole concept all the way back to the very beginning of the human story.
Right back to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden.
The text suggests that they walked in an unveiled relationship with God. They had direct access to the presence, to the glory.
But through their choice for independence, which is the essence of the flesh, they lost that access. They lost the glory. The Bible says they hid themselves. They put up a veil of fig leaves.
But then you get a passage like Romans 8.1718, and it connects us to a full restoration of that. It says that in Christ, believers are not only restored, but reinstated to a greater, untainted, secure glory.
So we aren't just getting back to zero, back to the garden. The argument is we're actually getting an upgrade. It's a better deal.
And what then, according to the sources, is the role of the church, the collective of all these individual earthen vessels?
The church is defined as the primary conduit for this glory on earth. The source often uses the metaphor of the bride of Christ.
And the purpose of the church, the purpose of this bride, isn't just to sit around and wait for a bus to take us all to heaven.
Not at all. A passage like Revelation 1.6 talks about believers being made kings and priests to God now in this life. The primary purpose is to reveal God, to manifest His glory on the earth.
That's a huge shift in perspective for a lot of people, I think. Many people see the goal of their faith as escaping the world. But these sources seem to be saying the goal is to flood the world with this indwelling glory.
Exactly. Look at the description of the final reality, the New Jerusalem, in Revelation 21:23. It's a stunning image. It says the city has no need for the sun or the moon to shine in it. Why?
For the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof.
The illumination for the entire future reality is the very presence of God himself. And the hosts connect this directly to the idea that believers collectively are meant to be that light in the present world. We're supposed to be walking, talking previews of that coming attraction.
That is a very heavy responsibility for a bunch of cracked clay pots.
It is. But again, we have to remember the core principle. The responsibility isn't on the pot to shine. The responsibility is on the pot to stay empty, to stay open, to stay transparent. The light does all the work.
So let's try and bring this all in for a landing. We've covered a huge amount of ground here.
We certainly have.
We started with that terrifying external smoke and fire of the Old Testament temple, this heavy, unapproachable glory.
We saw it move incredibly into the person of Jesus,
Yeah.
the Word made flesh.
And then came the final, mind-bending plot twist. That same glory now moves into us.
Into the earthen vessel, the common, cracked clay pot.
And we talked about why. Why the vessel has to be weak, so that the power is undeniably God's, so that no one mistakes the container for the treasure.
We looked at the mechanics of it, how the flesh, the ego, are self-reliant, acts as a veil that blocks the voltage that's already inside.
And finally, we looked at the ultimate goal. Not just personal improvement, but a restoration of glory on a cosmic scale, with the church as the intended vehicle.
For me, the main takeaway that just keeps resonating is that central paradox. We spend so much of our energy trying to hide our cracks. We curate our lives, especially online, to present this perfect, polished image to the world.
Right. Everything's great over here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the text is saying that the cracks, the fragility, the commonness of our lives, that is the exact place where the treasure is stored. The weakness is the point of contact.
So the call to action that's implied by all of this isn't go and fix yourself, try harder, be better.
No, not at all. It's almost the opposite. It's stop trying to fix the clay pot. Stop obsessing over the container. Stop trying to polish the flesh into something impressive. Instead, start focusing on the treasure that's already inside.
Victory, according to these sources, isn't about reforming the vessel. It's about finding the flow. It's about removing that veil of self-effort so that what is already inside can finally get out.
It completely changes how you view your own limitations and failures. Instead of saying, oh, I'm too anxious, or I'm too weak, or I'm too small to do this, the new perspective is, perfect, I'm an empty vessel, the stage is set.
Fill me up.
Precisely.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought, something that came up for me when I was rereading Isaiah chapter 6, verse 3. In the middle of that throne room scene, the seraphim cry out, "The whole earth is full of his glory."
It's a present tense statement, isn't it?
It is. It doesn't say the earth will be full one day. It says it is full right now. And if the sources we've looked at today are correct, and believers are the designated vessels for releasing this glory into the world, then here's the provocative thought.
Go on.
What would our world actually look like if all the earthen vessels, all at the same time, actually removed the veil? Is the apparent lack of glory we see in the world a problem of supply, a lack of God's power, or is it simply a problem of distribution, a lack of transparent vessels?
That is the question, isn't it? The power source is constant. The variable is us.
Something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
It was a real pleasure.
We'll see you in the next one.